Islanders have their third head coach in 3 seasons, third head coach in team history. The only one that lasts more than a season, of course, was Dave Haxtell. But we're talking, of course, about Lane Lambert, the new head coach. And so you might be wondering about Lane Lambert, especially in this hockey landscape where coaches are gone through pretty quickly. Look no further than Dan Bylsma being let go after just 1 year. So Lane Lambert, head coaching experience is limited. Okay, he coached the Islanders for about a season and a half. He led the Islanders to the playoffs in 2023. Good news there. He was let go in January, though, of 2024 after a really slow start. And certainly they moved on from there. And this past season, he was an associate head coach for the Toronto Maple Leafs, a Maple Leafs team that was really close to getting to the Eastern Conference Final. So what does this mean? Well, I think that hockey coaches especially, given everything we just talked about as far as the quick turnaround, you really have to look at the pieces here and look at, okay, why was he let go of the Islanders? And it was a slow start there, and certainly that roster recovered that year to go to the playoffs in 2024. The hope is here that Lane can take a Kraken team that is a really unique mix right now, okay? You've got veterans that are really good. Everybody knows about Brandon Montour, Vince Dunn, Jared McCann, Capo Caco, the list goes on Adam Larson, right, Big Rig. But there's a lot of young players, and certainly when you talk about the center spot, you have Matty Beniers, Shane Wright. Everybody knows about Berkeley Kettner, did great things out in Spokane in the WHL this year. So you've got these young guys that are on the come up. You've got these veterans that are in place. You would think that this is the time to kind of strike, okay? Will it be? Well, it's anybody's guess. I think the Kraken was hoping that Dan Bylsma could have done that, but that's not the case. And I think that whether it's the move to hire Lane or whether it's the move to just make this coaching change, we talked about this last month, it really signals a message from the Kraken, the idea that mediocrity will not be accepted. You went to the playoffs in 2023, just your second season of existence. You upset the Colorado Avalanche in 7 games. You took the Dallas Stars to 7 games, a Stars team that we're watching in the Western Conference Finals right now. And so the hope was that from that point, right, that you would become that perennial playoff team, that you took that and you would move forward. And I think this was actually predicted by some within the Kraken organization. I remember Ron Francis telling me that offseason, well, you know, just hang on for a second. He wasn't saying that they wouldn't make the playoffs, but to expect the trajectory to go in a linear way like that may have not been fair, because if you look at that 2023 season, a lot of lightning was caught in a bottle, okay? A lot of guys had career years. A lot of timely goals. A lot of things happened at the right time. The goaltending got really hot at the right time. When Philip Grubauer wasn't in the lineup, certainly his backups were able to pick him up, and then Gruby was ready and fresh for the playoffs. And so everything really worked out. The last 2 years it didn't. But there's also something to be said. There's a lot of organizations that would have said, well, we just made the playoffs last year, or in the case of right now, 2 years ago, and wouldn't have moved on from Dave Haxtell and then, of course, Dan Bylsma. But this team, from Samantha Holloway, the owner, to Todd Leiweke, they said, we want to be a playoff contender, perennial playoff power, and we're not going to accept anything less than that. So even if it means 3 coaches in 3 years, on the outside that looks like kind of tumultuous. It looks like an unsettled situation. And actually asked the front office that last month. They said it couldn't be further from the truth, because the players have bought into what this means moving forward. So that's the idea here. Lane Lambert, the new coach, like we said, limited coaching experience. However, there's reason to believe that, you know, maybe it was too small of a sample size, given all the background I gave you for a reason on the way hockey things work. Maybe Lane Lambert was moved on from too quickly. Maybe he wasn't. We're going to find out soon enough. But that's part of the Kraken vision here, is that this is the guy that can take those young stars on the way up, blend them perfectly with the veterans, and move forward from there. A question that was asked and, of course, answered by the Kraken last month, what does this mean for Jessica Campbell? Of course, the assistant coach star of the Kraken, the first woman to be a full-time assistant coach in the NHL. The Kraken says she will be on the staff. They said that before they knew Lane Lambert was going to be the person, but they said this with the utmost confidence that they love what Jessica's doing and moving on from there. Now, they would like to see the offense. They would like to see the power play specifically move forward. But, you know, I've seen some people say, you know, well, that was Jessica's forte. Well, it's not like Jessica's the be-all, end-all of that, okay? So I think that they think a new vision, a new way of looking at things will go perfectly with Coach Campbell's vision as well. So that's the idea in that regard as well. So hockey has a short offseason. I mean, technically, we're not even in the offseason, but with the Western Conference and Eastern Conference Finals going on right now. But this is one of many moves coming up for the Kraken this summer that are really huge for this team. You've got the new coach in Lane Lambert. Let's not forget, less than a month now, as I look at the date here, we will have the NHL draft. The Kraken has the 8th pick overall. Before and after that, things get really interesting. by way of trading Oliver Bjorkstrand, by way of trading Yanni Gourde, the Kraken has a lot of draft assets, okay? 10 picks in the first 2 rounds over the next 3 years. Ron Francis told me directly, they are not going to use all of those picks, okay? They'll use some, but they're going to use a lot of them to trade for proven talent. Not to mention, they have $20 million in salary cap space, which in the hockey world is pretty significant. Now everybody's talking about getting Lane Lambert from Toronto. Does that mean Mitch Marner's going to come from the Leafs over here? We can dream. I wouldn't bet on it just yet, but certainly whatever the odds were before, I don't think hiring Lane Lambert hurts that situation, okay? We'll put it to you in that way. But this is a really impactful, not just active, but impactful summer for the Kraken. When you're talking about the head coaching change, when you're talking about all those draft picks and the potential trades, certainly there's going to be some trades in that regard, and certainly they're going to attack free agency. We mentioned the biggest fish out there. Even if they don't get Mitch Marner, they're going to make some significant moves. So hiring Lane is the first step, but I'll tell you what, whether this works or not, and the jury's out on that, I don't know how to tell you that. If I knew, I'd be going to Vegas and putting some bets in to say the Kraken are going back to the playoffs. But I will say this. You have to appreciate the approach. One, that they're not messing around. One, that 2 years in a row not in the playoffs is definitely not enough. And certainly the 1 year before for think about that. Dave Haxtell in 2023 was runner-up for the Coach of the Year in the NHL. He was fired a year later, okay, just because they didn't make the playoffs in back-to-back seasons. That's that hockey cycle, but it's also that message from the Kraken. They want a winner for everybody here, and that's the idea moving forward, that they'll do that, and hopefully it comes to fruition. Hopefully that's what happens for this team. So there's a lot to break down with this, not just in the moment for what kind of coach Lane Lambert is. You know, a lot of people around the NHL would have liked to have seen the Kraken adjust more, right? I felt like if you watch this team closely, they kind of came out and did the same thing. And sometimes that worked. Other times it didn't. And so when it's almost like you want to see coaches make halftime adjustments or intermission adjustments. For the Kraken, I think it was a more big picture thing. I think they want fans and hockey execs, observers of the game alike, would like to see this team be able to come out there and say, okay, we can, match what our opponents are doing, or maybe not be so predictable right out of the gates. And that's the hope that Lane Lambert can bring that for this franchise moving forward. So the Kraken, adding to what's been a wild 2 years, not just for their franchise, but across Seattle sports and head coaching. We know the Huskies, the Cougs football programs, the Seahawks, the Mariners. Basically Brian Schmetzer's like the elder statesman of coaches here in the Seattle area, because a lot of franchises, no question, have moved on from their coaches. And the jury's out there. Mike McDonald had a good first year at 10-7. I think Jed Fish is absolutely on the rise. I think he's going to have a really nice second year with the Dogs. You talk about the Cougs, Jimmy Rogers, first year for him. We'll see what happens there. And I think overall people are happy with Dan Bylsma, but check back with me on that at the end of the season, no question about it. But in the case, if you asked me this a year ago, you're talking about Dan Bylsma taking over, and certainly that did not work out, at least in his favor. That did not work out for the Kraken in that regard. And now they're moving on. Lane Lambert, the third head coach in 3 years, but also the third head coach in Seattle Kraken history as we enter the 5th year of the franchise. So I appreciate you hanging out with me. Hopefully this filled in some of the blanks for you moving forward. The Kraken as their new coach. We are anticipating an introduction at some point next week, and when that happens, certainly we will bring it to you. But let's hope this is the change they need to get back to the postseason. Niko, Tamurian, KOMO Sports.
Perfect.